Hi, I'm Casey, but most of you know me around the web as Cartoon12 or ToonGal12 here on YouTube, and as my username suggests, I love cartoons. Even as an adult, I still prefer animated movies and shows over live-action ones, and I also love listening to people's opinions about their favorite episodes, so I thought, why not make a few top 10 lists of my own? I'd be interested to hear if anyone agrees or disagrees with my choices and see if people can point out some things that I might not have considered before. So for this top 10 list, I'm going to feature one of my favorite cartoon shows, Justice League. And Justice League Unlimited. Yeah, I know they're technically two separate shows, but come on, Unlimited is a direct continuation of the previous show, so heck with it. I'm just counting these both as one show, okay? If you've been watching my channel for a while now, then you may remember I did a top 10 countdown for the previous shows that launched the DC animated universe, that being Batman and Superman the Animated Series. Well, it's about time I finally covered the series that took every established superhero from both shows, along with plenty of new ones, and brought them all together. The showrunners really made deep dives into DC's long history and shone a light on a great many characters that I probably would have never known about otherwise if it wasn't for this show. Once again, the Paul Dini Bruce Timm writing team really set the bar for how superhero shows should be made and pulled off a shared universe better than anything the recent DCEU is churning out. Now obviously this is all just opinion, and I'm not claiming any of these to be the absolute best episodes ever. These are just my personal favorites. There's so many great stories from this series, it was hard to pick just 10. Have you got a favorite episode from this show? Leave a comment and let's talk about it. Without further ado, let's take a look back at one of the best adaptations of comic book characters ever made. These are my top 10 favorite episodes of Justice League. Number 10. Legends. Considering this is a show that streamlined and adapted famous characters from comic books, here's a story that's about as meta as you can get. The League is in the middle of fighting a giant robot when the Flash runs so fast that he accidentally transports himself, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and Hawkgirl to another universe. Specifically, a universe where the comic book characters that Green Lantern liked as a kid are real. Now the League must team up with their counterparts, the Justice Guild, to find a way back to their own reality, and in the process they just may uncover a dark secret as to how this alternate universe even exists. Typically in most media, when characters go to a mirror universe, 90% of the time it's a world where the alternate versions of themselves are evil and the villains are good, etc. So I think it makes this story a bit more unique in that our heroes essentially meet parallel versions of themselves that are also heroic, just slightly different. In this case, the Justice Guild is living in a time period somewhere around the 1950s and early 60s. Any comic-savvy person will also probably notice that the Guild is based heavily off of the Justice Society, of which they had multiple crossover events with the League throughout DC Comics history. In fact, the writers were originally intending for this to be a crossover introduction to the Justice Society, but for various reasons they couldn't get the rights to use the characters, so they just made up their own. Although if you know your comics, it's pretty clear who each guild member is supposed to be. And if you don't, that's okay. The story still works just fine enough as a great highlight of how superhero stories used to be written versus how they're handled now. In fact, if you have the DVD sets, I recommend listening to the writer's commentary track on this episode as they go into all sorts of behind-the-scenes info on how this story came together. They even bring up how they were heavily inspired by the movie Pleasantville, which has a similar premise of modern-day people being thrown back in time and how their present-day views begin changing everything around them. They say, quote, "It was the idea of showing the way we remember the world and the way the world actually was. That people remember the 50s of being this time where everything was nice and sweet and innocent, and yes, in a way it was, but there was also a lot of bad things about it that are better now." And that's honestly probably the best way to describe this episode. episode. It starts off akin to Adam West Batman, but then once it's revealed how this universe is being maintained, cold hard reality starts to sink in. I won't spoil the twist, as it's best you go into this one as blind as possible, but it serves as both a great and haunting look back at the golden age of comic books and how this era served as the blueprint for the characters we love to this day. Number 9. Fearful Symmetry. Okay, I'm just gonna say straight up, don't expect too many unlimited episodes in this video. I'm probably one of the few people who actually preferred the show back when it was just the original 7 members with the occasional guest star hero, versus when they had this sudden explosion of new characters, meaning that there wasn't as much development devoted to individual people. Unlimited also dropped the mostly episodic format of the first 2 seasons in favor of ongoing plot lines that got really heavy into conspiracies and villains trying to sow public distrust against the League. Now, there's no denying the phenomenal writing. Objectively, these later seasons were also great, but they also kind of hard to talk about without spoiling every major plot point. I think most of the episodes I'm going to highlight are great entryway stories for people to try out who haven't seen this show. But I'll make an exception here. Supergirl is being plagued by horrific nightmares, and she begins to suspect that these dreams are more than just dreams. So she teams up with Green Arrow and conspiracy theorist detective The Question to see if her suspicions hold any weight, and their investigation will lead them to discover an unhinged Supergirl clone running around, as well as a dark plot brewing behind the scenes that no one could have imagined. I won't give much more away than that, as this episode marked the true start of the smear campaign against the League plot that continued throughout the rest of the show, with various twists and turns that would take forever to explain. But kudos to the writers for giving us an episode that's actually kind of light on action and instead gives us an X-Files worthy mystery story with our heroes having to rely on their brains and subterfuge skills. But really, honestly, most of what makes this episode great is solely because of the introduction of The Question. The writers even admitted on the DVD commentary tracks that he became one of their favorite characters to write for, and he gets quite a bit of development throughout the rest of the show, even striking up a romance with the Huntress of all people. He's easily one of the best characters the series ever included, as he somehow simultaneously is and is not your stereotypical conspiracy theorist. Some of the things he says and does sounds crazy, but a good 9 times out of 10 he turns out to be right. And for how much he seems like a cold loner like Batman, he does have more than his fair share of moments that prove how much he truly cares about what few people he invites into his inner circle. Oh, and he likes pop music, apparently. Honestly, this one scene alone is the real reason this episode's on here.
Fell in love again. What am I gonna tell my friends? It just happened. You walked in my door, and now I don't wanna be alone no more. Oops, I've done it. Told you how I feel. Just hope this time that our love is real.
Number 8. Wild cards. Throughout this show's run, a good 80% of the time, the League is dealing with space invaders, world-ending catastrophes, natural disasters, or supervillains that have a personal vendetta against a certain superhero. And then intermixed with all this, we get what starts off anyway as a fairly simple plot about the Joker planning to blow up Las Vegas. Okay, well, yeah, what he's doing is pretty threatening and serious, but in comparison to other stuff the League deals with week to week, this is probably a slow Tuesday for them. And so the League splits up to try and find and deactivate all the bombs planted throughout the city, while also having to contend with the Royal Flush Gang, a team of superpowered criminals modeled after playing cards, who also happen to have the voices of the Teen Titans. No, really, the Teen Titans cartoon was airing at the same time, and they straight up just got the Titans voice actors to voice the Royal Flush Gang, which makes watching this both fun and a little weird, cause, well, it's basically the Teen Titans beating up the Justice League. Why they did this, I have no clue. For a fun Easter egg, I guess? Well, in any case, what makes this story stand out to me is that it showcases just how clever and malicious and dangerous the Joker can truly be, as here's a guy with no superpowers whatsoever, and yet he's able to send almost the entire Justice League on a wild goose chase, complete with a countdown clock that remains in the corner of the screen for most of the episode, so we the audience can keep track in real time of how close the League is to either succeeding or failing. It's a great little extra thing the writers didn't have to do, but by putting that there, it helps to ramp up the tension and suspense. As for why the Joker is doing all this, well, let's just say he was counting on the entire country tuning in to watch his night of sick entertainment. And now that he's got everyone's attention, he's ready to unveil his ace in the hole, as it were. I won't spoil anything else, save for that this episode also serves as an introduction to one of the most tragic characters in the entire show. As for who that is, you'll just have to watch and find out. Number 7. Secret Origins. What better way to hook your audience than with a 3-part story that ranks as one of the best pilot episodes to a cartoon that I've ever seen? The story begins on the surface of Mars, where a team of astronauts accidentally unearth a long-buried secret there. Turns out a race of malevolent aliens were beaten and placed in suspended animation there, but not before wiping out the entire Martian civilization, save for one. Mars' sole survivor, Jean Jones, then heads to Earth to try and warn everyone of the invasion about to transpire, using his mental powers to bring together Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Hawkgirl, Green Lantern, and the Flash, and together this group of 7 heroes must find a way to save the planet from total destruction. This should have been the live-action Justice League movie. No, really, this should have been the Justice League movie. Forget release the Snyder cut, where's the Paul Dini Bruce Timm cut? As mentioned in my Superman countdown, this same writing staff already did an excellent job of improving Supergirl's origin story, and they pull off their writing talents once again here. Why couldn't the live-action movies just take a page from the cartoons and just copy these episodes, or at least use them as the blueprint? In under an hour and a half, we get a tightly written action blockbuster that dishes out plenty of spectacle, a bit of mystery as you're left guessing at different points as to who the alien invaders are disguised as, and a ton of character building moments that in just a few short scenes manage to telegraph the most important things to know about each superhero in a way that's satisfying enough if it was just the one movie, but leaves you wanting to know more. Every League member gets at least one moment to shine, and much like in Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman gets the best introduction.
Allow me.
You can head on over to Linkara's Atop the Fourth Wall channel if you want a more in-depth analysis of this 3-parter and everything it does right from a narrative perspective, but suffice it to say, this pilot alone gave me a new appreciation for the Justice League, and it didn't need a 4-hour runtime to do it. Number 6. Comfort and Joy. If Secret Origins was one of the best cartoon pilots, then this is one of the best Christmas episodes of any animated show, and it's become somewhat of a staple for me to watch it every year. In just the span of half hour, we get 3 overlapping stories in which we see how 5 of the League members each celebrate the holidays in their own ways. The Flash is volunteering in an orphanage and runs afoul of the Ultra-Humanite while trying to find a sold-out super popular toy for the kids. Green Lantern and Hawkgirl essentially go on a first date and get in an epic snowball fight, and then a barroom brawl when Hawkgirl goes looking for battle, as that's the closest thing she can find to a similar joyful holiday from her world. And then there's arguably the best of the 3 stories, in which Martian Manhunter feels left out of the celebrations, since these are Earth customs he doesn't understand, to which Superman is like, "Not on my watch," and invites Jean to spend the holidays with him and his parents on the Kent farm. I think part of of what makes this special so great is that in most other superhero-related media, if and when they have a holiday special, they usually feel the need to make it some epic event where the main characters have to save Christmas, or help Santa Claus who turns out to be real, or believe in magic and yada yada. Not that those plot lines aren't fun, but I appreciate in this instance that the episode isn't afraid to have a very low-stakes story and just show our heroes doing relatively unspectacular things and just hanging out and having fun, which you don't get to see too often. I mean, the writers don't forget what show they're in, and we do get to see the League save a planet at the start, and the Flash briefly fights the Ultra-Human Knight, but it doesn't take up the entire runtime. We get one story about the consumerism side to the holiday, with Flash trying to deliver a special present with a funny twist that I won't spoil, and the other two tales comprise of characters sharing their cultures with one another. Jean's is especially touching as he feels like an outsider, and no doubt probably misses his own family, to which the Kents all do their best to make him feel welcome, and while they explain a few traditions to him, at no point do any of them force Jean to act a certain way or do stuff he doesn't want to do. They just help him relax and be himself and keep him company, which is probably the best thing to do for anyone who's alone on the holidays. And appropriately enough, it's his story that closes out the episode with what's probably the most touching ending to a Christmas-themed episode ever. I won't give away what it is, but let's just say you'll be reaching for the nearest tissue box by the end. Number 5. The Savage Time. Well, a superhero show wouldn't be complete without at least one time travel episode, and this ranks as one of the best. Superman, Wonder Woman, Hawkgirl, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and the Flash are coming back to Earth from a deep space mission, only to find, to their horror, that all of society has become a dystopian, totalitarian nightmare world. And thanks to Green Lantern's energy ring protecting them, they're the only ones who remain unchanged with their memories of their previous timeline intact. A bit of investigating reveals that Vandal Savage altered history, resulting in the Allies losing World War II and the Axis forces rising to power. Now our heroes must travel back in time and set things right, while also teaming up with the superheroes of the 1940s. While Legends may have been a great harkening back to the old days of comic book storytelling, this three-part story is an even better tribute, mainly because the writers got permission to use the actual characters this time, and so we get to see the modern-day Justice League team up with Easy Company, the Blackhawks, and most notably Steve Trevor, who in the comics was Wonder Woman's longtime love interest. I find it really interesting how the writers put a modern spin on many classic comic characters, and yet they didn't update Steve and purposely kept him locked in the time period where he first appeared. Granted, this does lead to some interesting character interactions and dilemmas when our heroes ultimately have to return to their own time period, but at least Steve gets a semi-happier ending than his live-action counterpart. As for the rest of the episode, it's basically one long smackdown with the Justice League fighting Nazis. Need I say more? And thankfully they managed to tell the story in a respectful way that doesn't make light of the very real and tragic events that actually happen. My only question is how the League managed to not affect the time stream even more. I mean, yeah, they fixed everything and it's clear an elderly Steve Trevor remembers what happened, but like, you'd think the history books would suddenly have pictures of Superman flying alongside fighter planes and stuff, unless everyone collectively agreed to not say anything about it in fear of being called crazy or something. Well, whatever the case, aside from that one oddity, this is just an all-around exciting time travel epic, and I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out the writers of the live-action Wonder Woman movie were semi-inspired by this. Number 4. Only a Dream. What happens when the Justice League faces off against DC's answer to Freddy Krueger? You get this acid trip of an episode. We start off with a pretty awesome fight sequence in which the League faces off with a bunch of supervillains who are in the middle of a massive prison break, but while everyone's distracted, the real villain of the story, a small-time crook named John D., overdoses on an experimental treatment that gives him enhanced mental powers. Calling himself Dr. Destiny, he then uses his newfound abilities to invade the minds of the Justice League and trap them in their dreams, turning them into twisted nightmare visions of their worst fears. It's then up to Martian Manhunter to enter his friends' minds and battle Dr. Destiny on the mental plane, while Batman hunts down John Dee in the real world, all while doing everything he can to not fall asleep. There's been plenty of stories in various media where the main protagonists have to confront their worst fears in some form or another, and this episode is one of the better implications of it. I find it interesting how Dr. Destiny, in the act of invading their dreams, probably now knows all of the League's secret identities, and yet he doesn't seem to care about having that information at all. It doesn't come up. I guess he's just perfectly satisfied with killing them all from the inside out, and so we're treated to an interesting window into what things the superheroes are scared of. The Flash can't stop running and moves so fast that the rest of the world is seemingly frozen in time, leaving him all alone. Green Lantern is left unrecognizable by everyone and is treated as just an extension of his power ring rather than an individual. Superman loses control of his powers and kills everything and everyone he touches. And Hawkgirl's claustrophobia comes out in full force when she's buried alive. It's not too often that the League's inner psyches are examined this deeply, so it's great to see some of their inner struggles addressed here. And once Jean enters the ring, we get some pretty creative fight sequences in the dream world with our heroes pulling off stuff they couldn't do in the real world. My one and only nitpick is that I wish we got a dream sequence fight for Batman too, as being able to go into his mind sounds the most intriguing to me. Then again, we already sort of had this scenario in the Perchance to Dream episode of Batman's own show, so maybe the writers purposely left him out because of that? Maybe, but still, I think it would have been cool if Dr. Destiny finally managed to ensnare Batman, only for Batman to immediately turn his dream around and beat him because he's done this sort of thing before. But now I'm just getting into fanfic territory, and the way it actually ends is still pretty satisfying and fairly creepy. To anyone who's even a passing fan of Nightmare on Elm Street, this is the episode for you. Number 3. Flash and Substance. Now onto something that's just plain fun. After going through 2 unlimited seasons filled to the brim with conspiracies, betrayals, and all-around dark story arcs of tearing down the system, here comes this episode to finally give us a bit of a breather. The Flash is about to have a museum dedicated to his many adventures, which was a thing in the comics, by the way, and naturally he's going to be there for the grand opening, and so is Captain Cold, Captain Boomerang, Mirror Master, and the Trickster, who all plan on crashing the party and taking their revenge on the Flash. And that's really about it. For a show that became so steeped in mystery and intrigue, I think it helps to take a break here and there and get a story that goes back to basics and is just pure, unadulterated fun. We get to visit the Flash's hometown and see just how much his good deeds have affected the city and how much the citizens appreciate him. And after having Superman and Batman's rogues galleries get most of the spotlight throughout this show and their respective series prior, it's great to see most of Flash's villains get some attention. Also, to those of you who saw my top 10 Superman countdown, you may remember that the episode where Superman races the Flash made my list. There I talked about how I loved watching the live-action Flash TV show back in the early 90s. Well, apparently the creators of this show loved it too, because they even got Mark Hamill to voice the Trickster, a role he played in a rather famous 2-part story from the 90s show. I just love it whenever past superhero series get nods like this, and also we're treated to funny scenes like,
"You know what? Taking turns is dumb. Let's just all jump him at the museum."
Brilliant.
Good deal.
But best of all, even amongst all the fights and one-liners, there is a subtle commentary going on in the background about the public's general perception of superheroes, and more specifically, how the Flash does take his job seriously, even though outwardly he acts like a bit of a goofball. This is probably best encapsulated in the scene where he captures the Trickster, just by sitting down and talking to him instead of beating him to a pulp. It shows how much the Flash cares about people, how he tries to take the non-violent option first, and how he is willing to give second chances if the wrongdoer in question is willing to make the change. So to anyone who thinks having the Flash on the League is redundant because Superman has super speed too, give this episode a watch, as it shows just how much of a unique and important hero the Flash really is. Number 2. The Great Brain Robbery. Boy, we're on a roll with the Flash episodes, aren't we? In the final season of Unlimited, the main story arc focused on Lex Luthor and Gorilla Grodd forming a secret society of villains rivaling the size of the Justice League, complete with a hideout that isn't even trying to hide the fact that this is basically supposed to be an updated version of the Legion of Doom from the old Super Friends cartoon. Anyway, while trying to gather information on the secret society, magic and science collide, causing Lex Luthor and the Flash to swap bodies. Now the Justice League must try to stop an out-of-control Lex abusing Flash's powers, and meanwhile the Flash tries to gather as much information about the villains as he can, all while trying to not blow his cover and reveal who's really running around in Lex's body. Much like the previous entry, this is another all-around fun episode, but with just enough serious undertones to it that it doesn't completely fall into utter silliness. With Lex in Flash's body, we get to see how powerful and dangerous the Flash can truly be when his powers are in the wrong hands, and how much Wally actually pulls his punches. And considering Wally is now trapped in a non-superpowered body, surrounded by dozens of supervillains who would instantly jump at the chance to murder him, there's quite a bit of tension in just how long he can keep up appearances before someone inevitably discovers Lex isn't quite himself. I also like how this episode manages to take an arguably tired body-swapping trope, but does it in the best way possible, and doesn't fall into the cliche of swapping the voices. So we get to hear Flash's hip lingo in Clancy Brown's Lex voice, and Michael Rosenbaum basically reprise his role as Lex Luthor from Smallville and make the Flash sound creepy. Yes, folks, this was all probably just one big Smallville Easter egg, and I love it. This all leads into what's easily the two greatest scenes in all of superhero media.
Okay. I'm trapped in a building full of supervillains. I've lost my powers, and for some reason, this creepy hot chick thinks I'm Lex Luthor. Oh, that is just wrong. What?
You gonna wash your hands?
No, 'cause I'm evil.
If nothing else, I can at least learn the Flash's secret identity. I have no idea who this is.
And my number 1 favorite episode of Justice League is Injustice for All. All things considered, this is admittedly kind of odd that this is only the 4th story of the entire series, but just a few episodes in, the show already managed to churn out my personal favorite story of all. Picking up on plot threads left over from the Superman series, Lex Luthor's criminal exploits are finally publicly exposed, and to his horror, he also discovers that he's terminally ill after being exposed to kryptonite for so long. He then forms his own supervillain team consisting of the Cheetah, Star Sapphire, Copperhead, the Shade, Ultra Humanite, Solomon Grundy, and the Joker, who invited himself, to take revenge on the Justice League. This newly formed Injustice gang proves to me formidable, so much so that they managed to plant a bomb on the Watchtower and kidnap Batman and hold him for ransom. But as they're about to find out, the one League member with no superpowers whatsoever could turn out to be the most dangerous of all. On the surface, this may sound like the simplest plot ever, and yeah, it is, but sometimes the simplest plots can be the most entertaining if they're executed well, and for me, this one ticks all the boxes of what I liked about this show. First off, it's one of the few episodes where the entire team is featured. In most other plots, there's always at least one character absent, but it makes sense to have all of them here, considering that this is also the first episode where we see a fairly big lineup of many of the League's classic villains from the comics, which also leads into some pretty great fight scenes. But best of all, it also serves as a great character study, mainly of Batman and his place among the Justice League. This topic gets brought up a few more times throughout the show's run, but this was the first real instance where it's blatantly pointed out that Batman's the only team member without any superpowers. And when he gets his butt handed to him in a fight early on, you can't help but wonder if Bruce's confidence was shaken, as it's pretty clear he doesn't want the others doting on him or pitying him. But once he gets captured captured by the villains, he soon makes it apparent that his mind is his true superpower, and one by one, in just the span of a few scenes, he manipulates each of the gang members into either making mistakes or turning on one another, if not beating each one of them physically, then by beating them through sheer mental tactics. This may not be the most action-packed or complicated episode ever, but if you're a Batman fan, then this is the story that proves why he's one of the most invaluable members of the League, and shows that superpowers alone will only get you so far, and that clever thinking is the most important skill to have. It's an early story, but one that cemented my great liking for this show, and it's why it's my pick for my favorite episode. I'm Cartoon12, and I hope you enjoyed the countdown. I'll have more top 10 lists and other fun stuff soon, so if you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.